Hello, welcome. For those of you, I think everyone's been to a StudioX, but for those who haven't, these are our sessions where we bring in awesome entrepreneurs like Wade, and we just kind of chat casually. I'll lead the conversation, and then I'll open it up for any and all questions. But a little background about Project Excite. Project Excite is the entrepreneurial hub on campus. It's cross-disciplinary, and we offer programming throughout the year that range in size and range in interest. So if you have any entrepreneurial spirit at all, Project Excite is for you. So we'll welcome Wade here. Thanks for coming. I'll let you kind of just give your background.
Sure.
And what projects you're working on now. A little introduction if you didn't get to look him up. He is a DU alum and then went on to do his MBA in Madrid and now owns 2 businesses. So I'll let him talk about his path to those businesses and what those are.
That was pretty good. I mean, that's on a high level. That's about it. I graduated from DU in 2007. It was right before the crash. What I will say, I'm actually more curious what the entrepreneurship program is like today. Because I remember one of the reasons I came to DU well over a decade ago was because it was rated pretty highly for entrepreneurship. But there was really no entrepreneurship program. Once I got here, I realized that, and it wasn't just here, it didn't exist. Even in my MBA, we probably had 3 or 4 classes around entrepreneurship. I have no idea what we learned. I literally to this day don't really know what we learned in those classes. And when I look back, what I actually did learn in my MBA was derivatives and financial based and cost accounting. The standard things that you would. I've never had a scholastic experience where entrepreneurship was taught effectively. And so if what I'm talking about today is redundant, I apologize, because I just assume these are things that are not covered in school. And for me, it was starting companies was really me and my business partner, who I got my MBA with, I met him in Madrid. We always described it as the real MBA. You'd learn all these things, and they'd seem really valuable, and then you'd put them into practice, and none of it mattered. It was completely irrelevant, and only now, years later, do we kind of come around to the things that we had learned, a decade and a half or a decade earlier. So, quick background on me: DU, investment banking. Teaching in Prague, ran a sales organization in Chicago. After that, got my MBA in Madrid, moved back to Denver on a whim, convinced my German business partner to move to Boulder with me, pretty much sight unseen, where we started our first company, Wishlist, in late 2012. We ran that. We just stepped back from active management of that this year. In 2014, we started another company, and we took that through the Boomtown Accelerator. That company is called Thrivepass, and we're the active CEO and COO of that currently. Both are doing really well. Both continue to grow. In fact, both just added 2 or 3 employees over the past month. So it's been a little wild of a time. And our office is up in Rhino. If you guys are ever up there and ever want to come by.
So what are Wishlist and Thrivepass?
Sure. So Wishlist, to say what they are is not going to provide an actual story of what we've gone through, because where they started was radically different from what they are today. What they are today is a rewards and recognition platform. This is Wishlist, a rewards and recognition platform for corporations who want to reward their employees around anniversaries or performance management or goal setting, and typically have an experience bent to them. But there's also gift cards and physical goods. Thrivepass is a holistic employee benefits platform. Started out as a wellness platform and then grew to include pre-tax healthcare benefits. We're looking to launch 401k and a Ben admin system this year. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So you're saying they're different now than when they originally started.
Definitely.
What changes did they have to go through, and why did they go through those changes? I know there's people starting businesses that are going to have to go through those changes.
Yeah.
So I guess when do you figure out they need it?
So I think, do you mind if I just take that and riff on that for a minute and probably only
long
partially answer your
okay. I like to do that.
Okay, no problem.
Just giving you
So I might barely answer the question. No,
Go for it.
The one thing I know is that the idea that you start with is really irrelevant, because it's not the idea that the company is eventually going to go to market with, or if it does go to market with it, it's going to change drastically over the period of time. And that's something that nobody ever told me when I was in school, that the idea is a tiny fraction of the overall point of the company, and most of what comes out of it you learn when you hit the ground. So Wishlist, I'll just give a case in point. Wishlist was it was going to be a experiential gift card company that would sell online and through consumer outlets, meaning you would go into a Walgreens, and next to the gift cards you'd buy a little booklet, you give it to a friend or a loved one, and they'd look through and they'd say, oh, I want to go whitewater rafting, or I want to go skydiving, or have all of these, get a massage. And it was a popular business concept in Europe. We loved the idea of selling gift cards. There's some natural business advantages to doing that. We found out quickly that we knew nothing about the consumer market. Neither Andreas nor myself, nor Charlie, my third partner, had ever worked in retail. We didn't know how to break into retail, and we weren't selling anything online. What actually, to be honest, the original idea was a pretty bad idea that we had. What saved the company was companies started to buy from us. So they would come online and they would buy 10, 20, 50, sometimes even 100 gifts at once. So we'd sit down with them and say, hey, what are you doing this for? What can we do to make it easier? And they'd say, well, we're pretty much giving it as a thank you gift to our sales team, or we're sending it out on the company anniversary, or it's for top achievers. So then we started building software that allowed them to do those things easier. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, well, the software became just as important as the actual products themselves. And then fast forward another 2 or 3 years, and the software is really, even though the experiences are a huge differentiator for us, outpaced the experiences in terms of what's important to our clients. Now, just in starting to provide these small little features, we were actually fulfilling a market niche that we didn't even know existed. In doing that, we get to work with hundreds of HR professionals. They continue to tell us things that were lacking. One of those things that was lacking was, how do we manage our gym reimbursements and our other benefits? That's what eventually gave rise to Thrivepass, which has its own product life cycle, starting from a wellness program and evolving all the way into a benefits platform. So if you start it, that's half the battle. And just not give up on it and continue to listen to product or to market research, to what your clients want. I think where people get in trouble is they fall in love with the idea and they need to make it perfect, and they're always worried that what they put into the world isn't going to be perfect, and it's not. And I think that was one of my earliest and the strongest learnings I had.
Okay, so it's being able to be open and listening and responding.
Yeah.
Well to them.
Yeah, because whatever you think you're launching, you're not.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the competition and the benefits platform kind of
Sure.
arena, just because I know that there's a company, down in Lakewood, Something Solutions, and then there's the Zenefits of the world, and
Right.
what's the competition dynamic there?
Yeah, the competition dynamic, because Thrivepass is a complex company in the sense that it has what I would call vertical competition and also horizontal competition. Vertical competition, if you look at an individual product. So when we do wellness programming, there's a ton of strong wellness competitors. Same with our pre-tax offering, tons of strong, heavily fragmented markets with lots of competitors. Then if you look horizontally, there are companies like Zenefits, Gusto. I'm not sure what the one down in Lakewood would be, but they could be a PEO. I mean, PEOs compete with you, but everybody sort of has their niche too. For example, we don't do broker services, and so that allows us to work directly with brokers, which has proven a huge gap in the market, because companies up until recently, Zenefits was a broker, Gusto is a broker. Most of the companies are either brokers or don't provide a very holistic product segment. But it kind of goes back, be cognizant of your competition, be aware of what they're doing, see what you can learn from it. But I also think people worry too much about competition. In fact, a heavily fragmented market with a large, heavily fragmented market is, I think, a great market to go into. Much better than an open market without competitors. And also be aware of what kind of competitors are there. Are they price competitors that are going to drive down the price so that you're going to constantly get into price competition, or are they value competitors? If you have to sell software to software, value to value, features to features, that's a good competitor because somebody's going to be in that space. You're not going to be allowed to be in that market without competitors. And I mean, even since we've started Wishlist, we've had multiple experience-based corporate gifting companies enter into that market. When we started, there was no one. But the reality is it's what we would call peacetime market. War times when it's shrinking market share, you're fighting over the same few clients. It's a growing market, so everyone can kind of grow and expand, and there's not price erosion because you don't have a couple wildcat competitors who are driving down price trying to win every single deal at whatever cost. So ask yourself, what type of competition is it? How fragmented is it? And is there a way to come into the market and to aggregate a lot of the existing competition? One thing I won't do, I probably won't ever start a company that doesn't exist in an already built market. At least I won't do that for a while. I definitely won't, like we had to create our market with Wishlist. It's gotten easier since we've had competitors, I would say. Because you have to educate it. If your value prop is, I'm going to sell you experiences, every sale starts with, let me tell you why experiences are meaningful. And that's just a hard value prop. Instead of, all right, we're looking for experiences, and it's between you and these two other companies. In that case, you're actually in pretty good standing most of the time. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but one thing that's hard not to do is to become complacent. And so you have to watch them to see what they do well. Do you like because a lot of companies will have strong features and poor UI UX. Other companies will have strong UI UX and poor features. Marrying the two of those and looking at your competitors and being like, wow, why does Virgin Pulse have such good design? Like, what is about their design that's really captivating? Whereas their features are not that strong, so then we look at other competitors in that space to try and find out where we can strengthen. And then come up with our own unique solutions, which will invariably be copied by our competitors.
I'm curious on the competitors, in terms of doing research on them, if they do contracts ad hoc with different companies, or if they have a paid kind of self-service model, then how do you get to scope out their product without, I don't know, becoming a customer, so to speak? Do you go to their customers and say hey, what do you like, and then try to explore?
Most of the industry that we work in there's plenty of industry analysis that goes back to not wanting to go into a I find a fragmented but developed markets or developing markets appealing. So typically you have some industry knowledge. You just talk to people in the industry and they'll let you know. Going to their website, you're going to get a ton of information. I mean, because people are that's one of the other things that was a big awakening for me is you want to hold everything in. You want to hide it. That's our natural instinct as entrepreneurs and as people. I can't put this out into the world because my competitors are going to see it and they're going to copy it. It's up to you whether you want to put your pricing out there or how strict you stand by that pricing that you do put out into the world. But things like your products, things like your design, your branding, your I wouldn't say mission statement, but your positioning in the market, it's going to be public facing. You're going to want customers to see that, and as a result, your competitors are going to see that as well. It's shocking the amount of things that are just in the public domain that if you want to find it, you can, because if you want to find it, chances are their customers want to find it, and that's just the cost of doing business. What I would say is people worry too much about their competitors finding those things. Yeah, if you've got some secret sauce, Google doesn't publish their formula, right? You don't want to give that all away, but you also don't want to make it so difficult to understand what you're doing and what's appealing that your customers or people that are researching you can't find that as well. So it's kind of the cost of doing business, and then the most difficult part is finding somebody dedicated to do that. When you're starting out, it's easy because you don't have legacy products, you don't have legacy clients, you don't have just a ton of stuff that sucks up bandwidth. So researching competitors it can be at the top of your priority list. Over time, it falls to the bottom because there's always more pressing tactical things to do that day. And so you have to make a conscious effort to care about that, because as one of the leaders of the company, nobody else is going to, unless it's their job. They're just not going to. And the reality is they have a lot of tactical things and a lot of short-term strategic things that they're having to do on an almost constant basis.
Very cool. Taking a step back, I know you did the Boomtown Accelerator.
Yeah.
What was the benefit of doing that, and would you recommend that to people who are starting up now?
So one of the things, we stepped on a lot of landmines with Wishlist. I mean, it was a learning experience, and I feel like a lot of those would have been avoided by going through an accelerator. So I would adamantly say yes. If you've got an idea, you want to vet it out, take it through an accelerator. I know that seems, where I think an accelerator loses value is a lot of times now, because these accelerators have been successful, if you're going to get into Y Combinator, you oftentimes have to take a later stage company into those accelerators, or Techstars even for that matter. And so then people will have, $500,000 or $1 million in revenue when they go in. I think the amount of benefit you're going to get in that situation, unless your company's stalled out, you can't grow it, you've hit founder problems, if something existential is going on in your company that you need to buckle down and focus on for 3 months, I feel like the benefits of an accelerator diminish rapidly once you're out in the market and you have some level of traction. If you're doing it for the connections, for the publicity, for the fundraising, you don't need it. There's plenty of ways to fundraise. There's plenty of ways to make connections. I mean, in this community, people just meet you. If you reach out and you take the time and you say exactly what you want to talk to somebody about, don't put the number one thing I can say is don't put the burden on them. Really absorb that burden and help set an agenda of what you want to talk about. They will meet with you. 9 times out of 10 people will do that. That's one of the most unique aspects about Denver and Boulder, is how giving people are. And everyone says that, and it's the truth. But in the early days, there are a ton of tangible benefits to joining an accelerator. You're going to learn a lot. There are a lot of things. Being in that environment is really stimulating. But there is also something to be said about you and your 1 to 2 to 3 founders being in a room 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 5 days a week, however much energy you want to put into it for 3 months. What will come out of it, it will be the most, it'll be the most accelerated time period in the entire company. And you really get about a year's worth of work done in 3 months, because you're all there, you're all present, you can't escape, better or worse. A lot of founder issues come out at that point in time. So it's also a good way to put the founder team through the ringer and to find out if you want to work together for the next decade or two. And I really wish we would have had the opportunity to do it with Wishlist, and it was a great experience with Thrivepass. Boomtown is, it's not as well known as Techstars up in Boulder, but phenomenal group of people, and they let us go in with, the reason why we didn't go into Techstars was we barely had a fleshed out concept when we took it in. We just knew, hey, we're hearing this. We've gotten feedback from 50 HR professionals. We think we have a market here that we could appeal to. We believe there's a product here. We don't know what it is. If you give us 3 months, we'll build one and flesh it out and take it to our existing network of clients. And they let us in with that. I'll be forever grateful for them for doing that, because they definitely didn't have to. And looking back, I don't really understand why they they let us in with so little formalized, but it's worked out well. Yeah, I think they're happy with it.
Are any of the mentors and folks that you met through Boomtown still active with you guys? Are there still people that you rely on?
Yes, there are quite a few. One in particular, his name, unfortunately, he moved to Nashville recently, but he was the CRO. He became the CRO for what's SendGrid's big competitor? Do you guys know, with the email deliverability space?
You know SendGrid.
Yeah, so it's about the same size as SendGrid. It's their big competitor down in Nashville. So he was their CRO. I learned more about SaaS sales and software sales in general from him. His name's Ethan Zubek, and he was phenomenal. We worked together for years, and I would like to work with him someday. I mean, we still talk. I talk to him regularly, and then there are a number of other mentors that we met through Boomtown that we're still friends with. We were very successful in raising angel funds in coming out of Boomtown as well. I think that was partially because we were more successful in Boulder than in Denver. We had been up in Boulder for a few years. I think people knew us. They knew we had gotten Wishlist to a point of meaning, and so that helped. But I was surprised at our ability to raise our angel round with very little on the docket. And I know a lot of other people. We were in a good class too. We had Parkify in our class, another company called Bitsbox, which you guys maybe know. Another company that's been renamed, but it's called Peach. They're out in Georgia, and they're doing quite well, and a few others. So it was a really stimulating experience.
Yeah. And so you touched on the fact that Denver and Boulder area are really great places to have startups.
Mm-hmm.
Was that in your mind when you originally chose to come back to back to Colorado? 'Cause
Yeah.
you brought your business partner out here.
That's a good question. There were two main drivers. On the personal side, I found out I was going to be a father. So I thought, wow, okay, we originally were going to move to Brooklyn. And I was like, I could be one of those guys, but I thought it might be better to come back to Colorado. I thought it might be easier. It already seemed like a lot to start a company in New York, and it seemed like a pretty big strain. So that was the personal determinant. But on the professional side, absolutely. It was right on the cusp of when Denver was starting to get well known, because it was 2012. There was a groundswell happening, but it was before, like, the galvanizers weren't in place. Hub Boulder wasn't in place. WeWorks weren't even. I mean, I don't even know if they had launched in New York yet. So there wasn't the kind of community that there is now, and an easy accessibility into it. So originally we were going to come to Denver, actually. And we found it difficult to break into the Denver community. So we were down here for a couple of weeks, realized, wow, we're not having success meeting people, getting into the community. And so we moved up to Boulder because we just found people were a little bit more open and welcome. Denver's radically changed since then. I don't take that as an indication of what it's become. And a lot of those successful Boulder companies have now moved down to Denver, SendGrid being the most obvious example.
Yeah. With the Wishlist, I saw a couple interviews where you said that you vetted all of the experiences. So I was wondering, do you get to actually participate in them? And what are your favorite experiences?
Good question. Those are old interviews. I'm amazed you found that. Yeah, wow. I do still use a lot. So they're not necessarily experiences, but like I go and get like a massage from our vendors probably at least once a month. Try out new ones all the time. It's like, oh, we got a new one. I should probably try that one out. And then I don't do a lot individually, but as a team, we do a lot of collective experiences. So we're going to be going up to, I think, Breck at the end of April, and we'll be using some of our vendors up there, and then we rent a big house. And Wishlist is up to around, in Denver, around 15 people, and then there's a development team in India as well that we've worked with for years, and those are Wishlist employees. So it's not a huge team, but we still are able to we're big enough that we can do things like rent out a house and everybody can stay there, but not so small that we don't have the budget to do it, not so large that it's become, we'd have to rent out the entire hotel. So we're really in that fun phase of development and growth.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, how do you foster a cool company culture when you're trying to get more employees? I know you said you just added a couple more on, and that's becoming so much more popular for the millennial group. That's what they're looking for in a company. So how do you do that?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I don't know, because I don't know if I ever.
4-part questions.
I don't know if I ever figured it out, to be honest. Culture was one of the most difficult parts of a business. It's something you don't plan for, because again, just like competitor analysis, it's never on your calendar. And so in the early days, it's just you. You know what I mean? It's you and your two founders and you're the customer support line and you're doing your taxes and you're reaching out to new clients. I mean, it is overwhelming. Then to also put culture on that and have your one-on-one feedback sessions with all of your direct reports, it's nearly impossible. But I think when the company's small, it is the job of the founders to really own culture. And then as the company grows, it's not, people will disagree with me on this, but I think culture becomes more collaborative, and I don't think it is a top-down only process as the company grows. So Thrivepass is a little larger. I think it's up close to, if you include the India team, close to 50 people. It's slightly below that. There comes a point when somebody needs to own it. So when a new employee starts, like the new employees, our HR manager schedules one-on-one meetings with all of the people in the office. Not just, so if you start on a Wishlist, you're going to meet all the people on Thrivepass. Thrivepass is going to meet all the people on Wishlist, and then they're on their own teams. You have about 20 to 25 meetings. Like, it's just not logistically possible for me or the founders to schedule those meetings anymore. But it also is hugely important to their integration into the culture. I wish I could take credit for putting that in place or even recognizing that it needed to happen. I didn't. Somebody else said, hey, this is something we need to do. We did it, and it's changed things radically. I think that's one of the biggest things as companies grow. You either believe that like culture starts at the top and then trickles down, or you believe that like in the early stages that's true, but then after a while it takes on a life of its own. I mean, it's funny because now some of the things I used to say when we were starting the company, they get used against me. So if I come in, I'm like, oh, this is going to happen. They're like, all right, that's the problem, but what's the solution? Because one of our like 10 core values are like, frame problems, bring solutions. And they'll say it to me all the time, and I'm like, you're right. But if it's just you at the top pushing it down and being the only one who really believes it, and if you stop, the whole thing falls apart, I don't think it's sustainable in the long run. And so you have to find, from a tactical standpoint, I'm a big proponent of hiring HR early and giving them, hire somebody that maybe, somebody a little bit more junior that maybe doesn't understand benefits or payroll or things like that, because you can train those things. Those are tangible skills that people can be trained into, and then really, but you believe and trust in their ability to help you with the culture. And they're going to, keep their finger on the pulse. They're going to know what's going on. They're going to provide that and roll that information up. They're going to set up the 360 feedbacks, because none of these things are things we didn't want to do, but they're never tactical, like immediate action item things until they become those things. So we would, until we dedicated time to team development and culture and hired somebody to just do that exclusively, we'd sort of lurch from like, all right, everything's good. I talked to everybody, and then 1 month later be like, oh, this person has a problem. Like, okay, like let's work it out. And then we'd kind of be like, all right, everything's good. I'm going back to my job. And it was just this series of reactive situations. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember what the original question was. I think it was something about culture.
Yeah, no, you answered it.
And I think that the biggest thing is, and then having people own it. And then at the management level, making sure they buy it. And so really everyone is accountable when somebody comes on board, that their direct reports understand the culture. We, on the Thrivepass side, had 2 acquisitions last year of companies in Minnesota. And the biggest part of that post-merger integration is team culture, because you have, of those 10 values, 8 of them overlap. And that's great. And then there are 2 that don't. And those are the 2 that you're going to focus on. But if it was dependent on me or my business partners, it wouldn't get done. And so everyone, all the managers, have to really buy into it as well.
Oh, very cool. And with your founding team, what have you found has been the best combination of separation of work and whatnot?
Love that question. Nice. I don't know if anybody's asked me that before, but I've had a lot of thoughts about it. So I think, again, opinion here, I'm going to say it like it's fact. It's not fact, it's opinion. But I think a 3-person founding team is perfect. And I think the 3 roles are CTO, COO, and CEO. But then understand, like, those are just titles. That's kind of nonsense, and it's not actually what you're doing. This is for a tech company, mind you. Like having a CTO probably wouldn't be relevant if you were going to start a restaurant or a food truck or something like that. But in tech, I think you need those. If you're going to go into an accelerator, those are the 3 roles. Your CTO is a full stack developer. Front end, back end, can do the whole thing. They're talented, and you've worked with them in the past. Don't go looking for them if you haven't worked with them. I mean, you have to vet them. You have to work on a project with them, because just because they're a talented developer, they also have to be able to like deal with stress, deal with deadlines, live without definite deliverables. I mean, being a full stack developer in a startup is radically different than being a full stack developer at a well-developed tech company. Second is the COO, and that's sort of the most nebulous one that people don't know, but really the COO is the one that's making sure everything's running. It's, they're handling the finances, they're making sure that operations is running. They might even be support, although the CEO should probably double up on support at the beginning too. And then once you hire your support people, which are usually your first hires, because that is, as soon as you have clients, you're going to have support. They'll typically manage those support employees and help with account management to some degree. But they're really making sure that the operation runs and is smooth and effective. Doing little things like, as you bring on investors, you guys are all familiar with the Colorado tax credit. For Colorado, huge. It doesn't sound like a big deal. Sell that to your investors. You can get them to pull the trigger. They'll move from 50 to 100K investment if you can show them how, oh wait, you can write off 25% of that. I mean, those things matter, and your COO is really the one who's going to get that stuff done. Then your CEO is head salesperson. Flat out, if you want to be the CEO, you got to bring in the first $1 million of revenue. Anyone who wants to be CEO who can't bring in $1 million of revenue, and that's SaaS revenue. I mean, because the first $1 million is like watching grass grow. You're in charge of the sales team, you're running the sales team, you're out closing deals, you're looking at contracts, you're helping on implementation, and then typically following up with account management. But that account management split, I mean, I won't get into that debate whether that's more of an ops or a sales role. It can be both. But the first $1 million, the CEO has to bring in, and the company lives or dies by that. I think that's your founding team. The person who's actually building it, the COO who's helping architect and keep things running, and the CEO who's out selling it and helping to build your sales team. And trust me, that CEO job, everybody wants it until they realize, oh wait, I have to sell the product? You're like, yeah, of course you have to sell the product. You're the one who's like representing the product. Everyone wants to hire a VP of sales or have a salesperson be one of their first hires. Do not hire a salesperson until you've sold to at least 20 clients and you know how it works inside and out. You can train them, because a salesperson will never solve the problems unless you've solved them. All they're going to do is do what you've done in the past and what you teach them to do. If you have to bring a salesperson in to solve your corporate problems, have a really hard, that's a reality check. And I think that's one of the biggest reality checks that every young company comes into, because sales will not come as fast as you want. So the easy, the big lever there is, hire somebody who knows how to do sales. I mean, they came from HP, or they came from, name it. And we've all gone through it, and it always backfires. It doesn't even backfire. You can't blame them. Their job is fundamentally different. You're out making a market. Their job at HP was closing contracts. Complete misalignment. If they were good at making a market, they'd be out starting a company, which is your job. So, sorry, really passionate about that one. And I've never had somebody ask me, so hopefully a bunch of you get to see that someday, because I think that's important.
Follow-up question to that. If you want to be the CEO of a company, but maybe don't have the sales skills for it naturally, what do you think are ways you can pick those up? Well,
I think the other piece there too is to ask yourself if you want to be the CEO or the COO, and then develop a partnership based around that. I think too often people think that the CEO, now we might be a special case, but I've mentioned Andreas and Charlie several times, and we have a really close, we've worked together for 7 years across 2 companies, and Andreas and I work, and Andreas works closely with Charlie on a lot of mapping and architectural things. I work closely with Andreas on a regular day-to-day basis, and I think between all three of us, we know our strengths, we know what we're good at, and we don't micromanage the other people. And if you feel like you have to monitor and manage your business partners, they're not your business partners, they're employees. So that's one of those things. Let's say you want to get in and really focus on product, and you want to focus on keeping the company running, and you want to scale up, your support team and your ops team, you're probably the COO, realistically, don't fight it. But then you need to find a CEO who's going to be able to sell that and represent that, and that you trust to do that, and that isn't effectively a salesperson. But let's say you're really adamant, you want to be the CEO. What training around sales would you do?
I mean, how do you become more comfortable selling things and selling yourself, et cetera?
So I think I'm one of those people. I think people either love or hate business books. I'm a bit more on the hate side of it. There are a few, though, that I live and die by. Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is Ben Horowitz. I mean, phenomenal. Reoccurring revenue. Everyone who's entering a SaaS market should read that. It's a little old, and it's been built upon, but the fundamentals are still the same. I think the number one thing is find a SaaS. Our products are SaaS, so that's really what I know. But find a SaaS sales mentor. Find a sales mentor that's in your industry, that's done what you're doing, of comparable size. Do not go, I know it's really tempting to be like, oh, this person ran enterprise sales at IBM. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter for you, and what they did, it might actually damage what you have to do. If you have a software where you're charging $20 a month for it, find somebody. There are so many good companies in town. Go talk to the head of sales at ZenPlan, or go talk to the head of sales at SendGrid, or a VP of sales, and just find out and understand the process, because you're going to be putting that into place. As far as actually becoming good at sales yourself, I think it's similar to the company. Just get in and do it, and accept that the early ones are really going to be rough. I remember those early sales calls being painful, and then also accept that it's probably going to be the most humbling experience of your life. I think that's the other reason why people oftentimes don't want to do sales, is it's humbling until you're good at it. Once you're good, it can be very comfortable, and it can become a niche and a comfort zone for you. But up until that point of time, it's humbling. Our early sales period, those were by far the most humbling experiences in my professional life. I mean, I got thrown out of Google. Google escorted me out of their office in Boulder. I walked in, I followed somebody in because the doors were locked, and somebody came in, and I kind of followed them in, and then I was like, hi, I'm hoping to talk to who's ever in charge of HR here, and they're like, yeah, 1 second, and then all of a sudden, 2 security guards just came out of nowhere, and were like, come with us, sir, and I'm like, okay, this is my lowest point. I mean, 2 times we were out of money. We were literally going to run out of money. We couldn't make payroll. And I walked around, and that was during one of those times, I walked around Boulder and sold Wishlist 2 companies until we had enough money to make payroll. I mean, that was back when GNIP was still a company. SendGrid was one of our early buyers. Bard at Full Contact was supportive. I mean, the rally, I got escorted out or asked to leave or dismissed so many times, but we always made payroll. I just keep knocking on doors until we had enough money, and the company rolled on. But super humbling. And I think if you don't want to do that, you have to question whether you really want to be the CEO of the company.
Definitely. All right, I have some more questions, but I wanted to pause to open it up to everybody, just in case.
I had a question.
Yeah.
You talked about your MBA experience earlier on.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it wasn't really overall a worthwhile experience with respect to you going into your business pursuits. Is that the correct thing to assume, or?
Did you say wasn't or was?
Wasn't. And that maybe it sounds like what you got from it was the partnership.
Yeah. I can see how you got to that from what I said. If given the option, I would do my MBA over again in a heartbeat. I think where it wasn't that productive was around entrepreneurship, because we read case studies. It'd be like, this company started this, but case studies they're interesting, but they're mostly describing situations that aren't relevant to what you're going to be going through. And the big part of a startup is the grind, and nothing prepares you for the grind until you're in the grind. And it's a sheer, like, really, whether the company survives or doesn't is really just down to like a sheer amount of will on some level. I think the MBA, though, one of the reasons I'm really grateful is your MBA and where you go will determine a lot of people that you work with in the future. Not only Andreas, but Skylar, Corey. I mean, there are 5 or 6 people that I've worked with since then because I met them in the MBA. And you're going to be working with smart, talented, driven people, and for me, that's what I got out of it. It wasn't. Speaking of SendGrid, somebody came in with a SendGrid shirt. Yeah. It wasn't to just learn about it. I went in hoping to start a company after, and so once I was actually they never taught us lean, they never taught us agile, they never taught how to fail fast. Probably now if I went to that curriculum, it'd be entirely different. But I think an MBA is very valuable, but the one thing I know is you get out what you put in. It's not a magic shortcut, it doesn't answer all the questions, and however hard you work at it is really what you're going to get out and the connections that you form. So it was a great decision in my life. I don't know how relevant it was. I also came out of it with a daughter, so I can't complain about it too much, or that was just that was good. What else, you guys?
So would you recommend an MBA for people?
I would recommend, and this goes against TU, so if you guys want to screen this, go ahead. I would recommend working for a period of time before you get an MBA. I'm a big advocate of not doing one immediately after your undergrad. And I think that's not just because everyone's like, oh, you don't have work experience, you don't know how it is. It's kind of true. It also you're going to be further along in your career period and the amount of people that you were with. I mean, the average age in our MBA at IE was 30, which isn't that old, but it was old enough where people had worked at the UN, they had worked at the WTO, half of them were strategy consultants, the other half were investment bankers. I'm exaggerating, but it seemed like those were the 2 big career paths, and then a smattering of like cool, interesting NGO. But everybody was driven. Everybody knew what they wanted to do, and they weren't really in the process of figuring out. Most people come in, I'm in consulting, I want to go into this. I'm in banking, I want to go into this. And that's what you want. You want people who know where they're going, because that's where a lot of the value comes from. What else?
Anything else? All right. I have a question. So talking about
Sure.
your MBA, it was done in Madrid,
Mm-hmm.
and you taught in Prague. So what do you think the international experiences you've had have brought to your 2 companies?
So, now it's a little less important, especially since we're in employee benefits, and that's a very uniquely American thing that's not applicable to really any other place in the world. But I always said that living abroad was one of the best things you could do as an entrepreneur, because what you're going to do is you're going to see opportunities there that the people on the ground don't see, because you know of them from where you were living before and where you grew up. But then conversely, you're going to see things that you like and enjoy and opportunities there that you can potentially take back to your home country. So it works in tandem. If you want to stay, you can oftentimes launch businesses that have an edge overall. Like, for example, this sounds really dumb, but back when in 2005, and maybe you experienced this when you were in Prague, like, there was no Mexican food, none. Like, no Mexican food.
There's still not in 2016.
Right, and and so I think that was a market opportunity. It's really it's taken over Scandinavia. Like, Mexican, you can find tons of Mexican restaurants. It's this huge growth industry, and it's probably still there in Prague. But it was so obvious when you come from abroad. You're like, oh my God, Czechs would love this. Like, it's exactly the kind of food they would love to eat, and they don't even know that they would love to eat this. And all the Americans here would love to eat it. But you're only going to know that coming into that economy. It's kind of a dumb example, but I do think it would have worked out. Going back, the original idea with Wishlist was a initially Portuguese idea that had then been adopted by a French and then a German company, and exists to this day all over Europe. You can walk into a bookstore or a into primarily bookstores or a large gas station in Germany and France and Spain and buy little experience booklets and give them to somebody, and they can have an experiential gift similar to a gift card. That idea works there. There were a lot of reasons why it didn't work here in the US, but that initial idea is what got us to launch Wishlist, and I think just that spark of creativity is even why the companies exist today.
Okay.
So huge fan of living abroad as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. So being an entrepreneur of two different companies, I know you said you've stepped back now from leadership with Wishlist, but how, when you were in the leadership of both, how did you balance the two?
Yeah, that's one. That's definitely one where I would say, like, don't do it. Like, short and sweet. Like, I didn't do it well. It seemed like one was always suffering when the other was, because I would like kind of pivot. I'd focus on this one, and then I would get going and be on the right track, and so I'd swivel back over here, and then that'd kind of go off the rails. It only started working when there was a second layer level of leadership that could run the company without me or the other founders. And that takes time. You need to be, the only time that you could theoretically do two is in a later stage. So it can't be like early stage startups. And even then I wouldn't recommend doing it. And so I've been essentially trying to train my replacement at Wishlist for years. It was last year where we found somebody it's been phenomenal. His name's Dan Casper, and he's just become a great GM. And so he's taken over really what I was doing for the first 3 to 4 years of Wishlist's existence, and then less effectively the 2 years after that. And the whole team suffers. What I will say we learned early, and we didn't get mixed up in, we didn't have members of the team besides HR cover both companies. So we didn't have a salesperson doing both or a customer support person doing both. That would have been disastrous, because where do you prioritize? How do you get somebody to say, all right, am I focused on this or this? Because you can only serve really one entity at a time, and the other one is then going to be put on the back burner. Mm-hmm. And you're setting them up for failure at that point. So my recommendation would be not to start two companies, not to run two companies. And if you're going to do it, you have to have a really strong second level leadership that can effectively, tactically run the company day to day without any input. And if you can't say yes to those, then just wait until that situation arises.
Yeah, definitely. You've talked throughout about prioritizing different things within the business. How
Mm-hmm.
how do you ultimately prioritize?
Getting better at it. It's like nobody's. I think that's something that everyone works on and struggles with, because it definitely is like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think, ironically, putting things on your calendar, I'm not a huge proponent of weekly, you should have a stand-up meeting every day, and you should have all these weekly meetings. It starts to bog things down. But I think there are things such as, for every direct report, and now it's like a policy, or just a cultural policy, I should say, in the company to do a one-on-one with every direct report once a week. And that might sound like overkill, but it allows you to head off a lot of stuff that's going to come to you as reactive. So as it's gone on, it's become less about time management. It's more become about energy management, meaning how many things can I shift from the reactive over to the proactive? Because it's the reactive stuff that kills you. That's the stuff, and it's going to be there. It always will. But those are the things that you don't see coming, and when they hit, they just absolutely drain you. They devastate you. They take out momentum. If you can work with somebody over a course of 3 weeks to avoid a blow up, that's better than having to scramble and fill that gap once that blow up occurs. But what I would say with prioritization, we've also gotten, especially in Thrivepass, on the point where it's less valuable for me to work in the business and more to work on the business. And that's not that day has arrived, here's that day. It's a gradual rollover, and it's a tough rollover, because when you first start, all you want to do is work on the business. You want to talk about strategy, and you want to say, like, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to build. And so, but you're in the business constantly, and that's the only thing that pushes it forward. Well, then after your sales teams are in place, and your support teams are in place, and your account management's doing well, and you've got that second level leadership, you don't need to work in it. And you start, and you kind of have this muscle memory of being in the business and looking at all the support tickets and being on all your quarterly partner reviews. And eventually you just start getting in people's way. And so then it's an effort to step out of that and to focus on working on the business. So I would say most of my prioritization is like, what are the main things driving the company? What are the main things that, if we don't think about those, could cause the company to go off the rails in 6 to 12 to 24 months? And then a little bit of time spent on the 5 to 10 year plan, and some things in the tactical just to keep my finger on the pulse, and then slowly continuing to shift that more and more. Does that answer the question? That was a little bit ambiguous,
No, definitely.
but I think it's more and more of a shift to strategy. And then the other thing, it's gone from sales, but fundraising still falls on me. So we just closed a Series A for Thrivepass, and that was a really fun experience because we had a lot of good news to share, and it wasn't a difficult raise, but there's legal review, you're talking to lawyers. Actually, the amount of time you spend with investors as this goes along is pretty minute compared to the amount of just random stuff that has to get done. And that's something to think about too. Your cap table matters. Nobody ever told me this, and I think it's important. If you have 10 angel investors, you're gonna have to send them notices whenever you want to raise again. You're gonna have to, there's a lot of, I want to call like just administrative debt that comes with large cap tables. So we've been working on cleaning ours up, and that typically falls on me.
Very nice. And you mentioned kind of that you spend some time on the 5 to 10 year plan, but where do you see Thrivepass going ultimately, or what's your goal with it?
With Thrivepass, the goal there is, in the same way that we think of ADP for payroll or Workday for HR, to have Thrivepass be what people think of when they think of benefits. So a holistic benefits suite that employee can log on. It's the first thing they do when they join the company, and they learn about their HR benefits, they learn about their 401k, they learn about their medical benefits, and if they have questions, they come back to it. So changing employee behavior enough that instead of going to these 20 different sources of employee information in their employee handbook, the first thing they do is they open up Thrivepass and say, okay, what are our dental and vision coverage? When is open enrollment? What does it look like now that I actually have to go to the doctor and I have to have a copay? Because people don't think about that when they're actually getting it. So yeah, holistic benefits suite. And there's a lot of different ways to get to that. So the route between here and there is pretty complex, and there's different ways to do it, but we think we have a pretty good way focusing on wellness, pre-tax, and then medical.
Nice. Perfect. And because we have some students who have businesses in here, what advice can you give to them while they're still students? What
Sure.
do you think that they can do to kind of get their business?
Yeah. I feel like so many of the things that I'm saying today are things that you guys might already know or that you already hear, that there's a lot of mentors that you can work with. What I would say is, as far as getting your business ready, it's really, if you're serious about it, get your team ready. I think that's the number one thing. And what I talked about with those 3 positions, I really mean that. And if in your heart you feel like somebody's a weak link, now's the time to change that. I had 2 business partners before Andreas, and it's not that they were, weak links is a little, if it's just not a good fit, and they turned out not to be good fits, and that was a mutual decision by everyone, but I look back and I'm grateful that team turned over. It's a lot harder to do it once you launch. So start having those conversations now, plan it, get them excited, vet them, and work on those projects together. Because you don't really know how it's going to be, unless you've done a ton of projects with them, or you've worked with them in the past, you don't know how it's going to be until you're in the trenches. And if you devoted your 18 months of your life to something, and you realize like, oh my God, I can't be with this person, it's a marriage. Whether you know it or not, those partners, you can't just easily move a partner out of a company. You really signing up for a marriage, and those divorces are costly. So I think that's the number one thing you can do to prepare. Find the team that you want to launch a company with, vet them, test them, and see where that leads you.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. So you talked about as you step back from a business and letting other kind of leadership and that
Sure.
kind of structure take over. Curious if you had any advice on how to make sure that all of the things that you need to be learning are actually getting learned while you're not there. So when you're actually in the business and you have your thumb on it, it's very easy to tell, like, okay, like, I want to go investigate this, or this is an area we should be thinking about, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do you tell that when you're not actually in the trenches and you're more like letting the team do it?
I think that comes down to, if I'm understanding the question right, it sounds like you're asking about how do you make smart long-term strategic decisions when you are not a part of the day-to-day.
Exactly,
Yeah. It's a good question. It's one that I still struggle with constantly. And I think a big part of it is trust. You have to have people in those positions that you trust. Is it important for me to understand everything that we're doing on the customer support and customer success side? It's not, unless it becomes an issue. Then it's a critical and unfortunately strategic part of the business for a short period of time. But once you have somebody in that position that you trust and you can let it go, that's really how you step back. So I think as the team fleshes out, that level of trust allows you to let go of those things. As far as your own personal needs around that level of information, it's kind of, I would best describe it as your homework. And nobody's going to help you develop what that is. It's really up to you to know what's your ongoing homework, and that's going to change. I have KPIs that roll up to me from every department. I look at those, I study those, but even those don't provide you with that much. Why, for example, are support tickets out of SLA, and is that relevant? Even if we can find a solution to that, is that something that I really need to be involved in? It changes. The one thing I would say that you want to continue to do over time is be a part of the sales process. I think the other parts, when you find strong operators, you can let them go. In the sales process is sort of where that also provides you a ton of industry knowledge. And so I try and sit in on QPRs, which are quarterly partner reviews, which we do with all of our clients. And then for any mid to large, any strategic acquisitions, I'm a part of that sales process. I'm not leading it, I'm not in there causing problems, but I'm listening to what they need, hearing where it's going. What are we providing? Why are they picking us over our competitors? Understanding that, or why are they picking their competitors over us? And then the one thing I do beyond that, when we lose one of those, I will do the post-mortem. So it'll be a call that I have with their team, and typically they'll say yes to that. And we have a series of questions that we ask about why we lost the business, what those reasons were. And sometimes just even the act of me hopping on a call to talk to them will restart and re-engage, and we've gotten some clients doing that. But the main reason is to understand why we miss. Because if you're losing on sales, that's really where there's the two main parts are you losing sales and are you losing client retention? Customer support, even tech, I don't have as active of a role in tech, and I'm losing some of my influence on product, even though I really like to keep a toehold in product. And it's just a decision that you have to make. The one thing I would say is be proactive about that decision. Don't let your scheduling, don't let other people putting a bunch of time on your schedule determine what you're focusing on and what you're not focusing on. I wish I could give you a more concrete answer, but I think it's something that everybody struggles with.
All right, I'll have one last question.
Okay.
I'll do a fun one. What's an experience that you've had that you would like to be able to gift to somebody through Wishlist that maybe isn't on there?
Through Wishlist, an experience that...
Or an experience that's not on there but you've had that you'd like to.
I would say it's not an experience per se, but I think so. I mentioned already, every year we go up with the team and we do something in Beaver Creek or in Crested Butte or in Breck. I wish that all of you guys could experience something like that, and that you have the opportunity to experience something like that with your teams. It's phenomenal. And then to really do your cultural mapping at that period of time, to have amazing experiences with somebody during the day, whether that's whitewater rafting or snowshoeing or skiing, and then to sit down and put together what it means to be a part of that organization, to do that as a collective group in an offsite. I've never had an experience like that until Wishlist, and I look forward to it every year. So that's what I would gift everyone here as you start your companies.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
So much.
Yeah, appreciate it, you guys. That was great.